Welcome, welcome everyone to our webinar about game hacking breaking the blockchain. Today I will be guiding you through the world of blockchain-based games and the security implications that come with them. Thank you all for being with us here today, and sit back, relax, and I hope that you will enjoy the knowledge that we will be sharing on this topic today. Let me start off by telling a bit more about myself. I'm Tim, CTO and co-founder of Cyrex. Since I was very little, I started to explore computers and playing my first casual games on a Windows 3.0 at the time using floppy disks and also a couple of Linux distributions. The arcade times, those were before me, but I did play some iconic rocket shooters and casual games like that. At the age of 11, I started to gain interest into the inner workings of computers, and I started to write my first scripts. I created a couple of simple websites using HTML and CSS, and wrote my first computer programs. Since then, I've never lost the interest in computers, and I always wanted to learn more and dive into the newest and latest technologies that are out there. I'm very passionate about anything that has to do with gaming. As for me, it's one of the more complex fields within the IT industry. And overall, obviously, it's fun as well. So anything that has to do with the life cycle of game development really attracts my attention. And next to gaming, I also always wanted to understand how things work under the hood when it comes to computers. And that's when I got more interested in cybersecurity and reverse engineering, tearing programs apart and really understanding how it works. And well, nowadays I'm an experienced ethical hacker and security engineer that is focused on the offensive side of the security fields, attacking networks and applications, obviously for the good, to find out vulnerabilities there and report them to companies. A bit more about Cyrex. At Cyrex, we're the gold standard in security, which we will be mostly talking about today, but we also are doing load testing and development within Cyrex. We have a team of highly skilled ethical hackers and software engineers that are very passionate about what they do every day with us. And our team, just like me, likes to explore all those new technologies and new things that are out there. We are doing on a regular basis Hack Fridays where we share knowledge with each other, but where we also dive deep in a new field or a new technology to really stay on top of things and learn about what's new out there in the market. At Cyrex, we're very active in the online gaming space, making first of all sure that games are secure, but then we are also making sure that games are scalable through load testing, and we are also working on backend services, developing them for online games. From the very beginning, we also had enterprise customers in both the fintech as healthcare space, and we are working there with banks, for instance. As part of staying on top of things very early on when the blockchain came up, we started to explore how it works, what are the security implications of it, how do smart contracts work, and we did our own research even before there was a lot of material about it online. And we started doing tests. We are doing tests for multiple years now on decentralized applications for a lot of our customers in the fintech. And lately, we're also seeing a lot of synergy there with our gaming partners as they are creating and exploring NFT and blockchain-based games. I wanted to showcase some of the parties that we are working with at Cyrex. We wouldn't be anywhere without them. Their trust and their amazing game titles that we can work on it's truly helpful for our teams out there, and it makes us as Cyrex an amazing company, and we really are able to make a difference in the industry by working with them. I would also like to express a thank you to our sales and marketing department for being able to work with such amazing partners, but as well for inviting you all here today and making sure that you could join this webinar on such an interesting topic. So thank you all for joining. I'm very excited to tell you more about the security aspects of blockchain-based gaming. So what will we be discussing today? First of all, we will take a look at what is blockchain gaming. I assume that all of you have some notion about it or some interest, hence you are here today, but it's always good to fresh things up and be on the same page and same level. Next to this, we will take a look at what makes security so important for blockchain-based games, and maybe even more than any traditional game out there. Afterwards, I will talk a bit more about a common myth that blockchain is secure by nature. While this is partly true, this doesn't really mean that you, as a developer or a game publisher, don't need to worry about security. And then during the last parts of our presentation, we will get a bit more technical and dive into the different components of a blockchain game that needs security and what are some of the typical vulnerabilities that we encounter in those components and how do they impact your game, your business, your players, etc. There are constant news reports out there of hacks and assets that get stolen on different blockchain networks. But I wanted to take one headline that was very recently in an article of Forbes, where they wrote an article about a recent Horizon bridge attack. So as you can read in this headline, over 100 million US dollars was stolen, which is quite a substantial amount. But what's even more worrying out there is that the total amount lost from blockchain networks in 2022 is above 1 billion US dollars. And I guess that's just an estimate, and we are only halfway through the year so far. Hacking crypto platforms has really become the new bank hacking, and it's even a lot easier than hacking banks. Obviously, we are past the physical bank hacks, but when you look at a digital bank, for instance, and an online platform, there you need to register an account, you need to supply your identity towards the bank to be able to interact with the platform. All those barriers and boundaries, they do not exist on blockchain networks. Blockchain networks are worldwide, everyone can access them, they are pretty public, and you don't need to supply any identity information to start interacting with them. You can do it fully anonymous, and this makes it really attractive towards hackers, because if they steal a certain amount of assets, this reflects in real world money that they can trade it off and then they can use it in real life. So it's a very beneficial way for them to gain money out of this. So we should really start upping up our game here and taking security more seriously, all companies that are working or interacting with the blockchain. So let's take a closer look at what blockchain gaming is. For that, first of all, we need to understand what is the blockchain. I'm not going to go too deep in this because I assume that most of you have already heard about blockchain and have some notion of different blockchain networks. But basically, a blockchain network is a decentralized register that holds information about digital assets and who owns certain assets. So persons have a wallet on a blockchain network, and then within this wallet, they can have certain digital assets. Because it's a decentralized system, this means that there is no single party or single authority that has ownership over it. So there are always multiple independent parties, computers in this case, that are verifying transactions on the blockchain and that are actually validating if this particular wallet effectively holds this asset. And in that way, things are very transparent out there. And it's one source of truth that can be used by multiple applications, multiple games, etc. Now, when we're talking about gaming, then in gaming we have a lot of digital assets. Think about virtual currencies that you have within your game that you can purchase certain items with, or actual items that you possess in your game. These can be things that are in your inventory, like weapons, but it can as well be the character that you're playing with. All of these are digital assets that exist within the virtual world of the game. Because there are so many digital assets within a game, this makes a match between blockchain and gaming, because then really those assets can be owned by the player. Over the last years, we have seen blockchain being integrated in multiple games in multiple different ways. And I want to highlight a bit of the common ways that we have seen over the last years. Obviously, this field is very much evolving day by day, so there are always new ideas to integrate blockchain into games, and it's not clear at this stage which one will survive or which one will become the most popular or the best fit for both companies as players. So things can definitely change here over time. But whenever you have a blockchain in your integration in your game, then tokenomics definitely come into play. And tokenomics is a new field within game design, within economy design in particular, in your game where you implement certain crypto tokens within your game. These can be fungible tokens, which are virtual currencies. There are an endless amount of those tokens. And you can see them as premium currencies, for instance, in games, or actual in-game currencies where you can go into the shop and buy something. And then you have the non-fungible tokens, NFTs, which are unique or limited items within your game. And then we're talking about weapons, we're talking about characters that are very unique and or limited in amount. Well, having virtual currencies within your game is pretty known concept. It exists in free-to-play games, but also in the bigger MMOs. You can just walk around and go into a shop, buy certain armor, clothes, weapons for virtual currencies, just like you would do in the real world. NFTs did add some new concepts and ideas to games. We are seeing that a lot of games are doing, for instance, an NFT sale before they launch their game, which is very similar to how companies used to do a Kickstarter campaign before an fundraise, with the difference that now, whenever you're purchasing an NFT, the person that bought it already has, for instance, the character that he will use to play the game. So in that way, he gets something in return for the funding, and then the company can also have funds to really create this game title. Some of the common NFT sale concepts out there are, for instance, land sale, where you get a certain piece of land within the virtual world of the game, but also it can be cosmetics like characters, like I mentioned, that will then be used to play the game. Using NFTs and tokenomics has really created a whole range of new game types, but I wanted to highlight two out there. One of them is probably the one that's most mentioned and most used is play to earn. And the reason for that is that it has become pretty big over the last years. I would say that right now it's more in a regression because there is some negative feedback from hardcore gamers, but we have seen some very successful play to earn titles like XE Infinity out there. And the concept of play to earn is that you give players that play your game the chance to earn digital assets that they can then sell off, trade for real currency. So by playing the game, actually, players earn money and they can even get an actual income from this. As I mentioned before, this got some negative feedback because of the focus on grind work within the games to really obtain that money, but as well, some players say that it removes the fun element of playing a game. A more new concept out there is create to earn, and this ties together with a lot of companies trying to create metaverses, but also the popularity of user-generated content in games like Roblox and Minecraft. Modding has been a concept that has been around since the start of gaming, but as we are seeing now, players want to create or co-create within the game that they are playing. They want to create these amazing worlds, assets, or even mini games within a bigger ecosystem, and they are spending a lot of time to really create those assets. And it seems only fair if they are spending this amount of work, effort, and time to create something within your game, and they really become a co-creator of your game, that they also earn something in return, and this can be a crypto token, for instance. So why is security so important within blockchain games and even more than in traditional games? We already highlighted before that hackers really target the blockchain because it's an easy way to gain monetary benefit. If they find a vulnerability out there, then they can really easily translate that in real money. But as a game developer, there are also two key points that highlight why it's so important and prime to really care about security within your games. First of all, blockchains are immutable. What does that mean? That means that whenever a transaction on the blockchain gets verified, that there is no way to undo that transaction. Multiple parties have validated that transaction, and in order to revert that transaction, all those parties should agree on this, which is something that generally doesn't happen. So in case a hacker is able to steal assets, whether it's tokens or NFTs from another player, or even you as a blockchain developer or publisher, there is really no way to get those assets, that money back from the hacker. What we have been seeing over years, whenever big hacks happen in bigger games, is that they roll back the database. So they have a backup of the database of 24 hours ago, for instance, and they restore that backup, which resets player progress that has happened during that day. But players won't be happy. They won't be satisfied that you're resetting their player progress. But on the other hand, they won't kill you for it. They won't leave the game. It's a day of progress lost. If a player loses his assets, if he loses his money within the game, and there is no way to grant that back towards him, or if you as a business are losing a lot of money or assets, then this can have a real impact. The other thing is that whenever tokens get stolen or NFTs out of a game, that it has a real impact on the game economy, because those tokens have a place within the economy, and if a lot of tokens get stolen, then first of all, your token will be devalued, but next to this, players won't have tokens anymore to play the game, for instance, so this can have a real impact on your game. It might not even be playable anymore after such a serious hack. Also, the players that are playing your game, they paid real money in a marketplace. For instance, they bought an NFT, or during the pre-sale, they bought NFTs. So they paid real money for those assets. And if they then get stolen, then obviously they feel robbed and they will get very mad. So what we are hearing a lot is, well, isn't blockchain secure by nature? Wasn't blockchain created as a concept like, hey, we have this party out there, this independent authority that nobody can tamper with, and every transaction that happens, it's validated, it's verified, it's secure. While this is true, so layer one blockchain networks at their core, they are being validated mathematically and cryptographically. There is no way to break them at this stage with the current computing power that we possess. Multiple security parties have validated all those core code in there, those core concepts, and there are public reports out there that prove that they are really secure. Anything that you as a company write on top of that, whether it's an API that integrates with a blockchain, whether it's a smart contract that resides on the blockchain but holds custom code, all these elements that you created, custom logic for your game, for your environment, all those can contain security flaws. And those security flaws can lead to a loss of tokens or stealing assets from another player. And this can, as highlighted before, have devastating consequences for your business and your game. So let's take a look at the traditional components that come into play whenever you're developing a blockchain game, and what makes them so special and why they need security. So first of all, we have smart contracts, and this is the part that's closest to the blockchain. Actually, every token that you create, whether it's an NFT or a fungible token, they need to have a smart contract. Within that smart contract, you write certain custom logic that then gets uploaded towards the blockchain. And whenever you're transferring assets from one wallet to another, or you're doing specific actions, with those tokens, then you are calling specific methods within those smart contracts, and those methods are being executed on the blockchain. They can regulate, for instance, how tokens are being distributed, how they are sold, if there are certain fees whenever you're transferring tokens from one party to the other, etc. As they are being executed on the blockchain, they have the same level of validation as any transaction that happens on the chain. Multiple parties will validate the result of the method that you called within that smart contract. They are also immutable like anything on the chain, so that means that whenever you have uploaded your smart contract, that there is no way to change it later on. You will have to re-upload a different smart contract. But if all of that gets validated on the chain, then why is there a security risk or a security impact? Well, it's custom code that you write within those smart contracts, and within that custom code, you are writing custom logic which might allow a user to transfer assets while he should not. Or, there are also a lot of technical code vulnerabilities possible within smart contracts that can allow one player to steal assets from another, for instance. Since those smart contracts are immutable, it's very important that those vulnerabilities are being spotted early on, because as soon as the contract is on the chain, there is no way to change it anymore. The second component is bridges, and we have talked about this. Well, at the very start, there was this article of the Horizon bridge that has been attacked. So what exactly is a bridge? Nowadays, a lot of games are using layer 2 networks or private chains. And those are used in order to speed up transactions, for one, because the main blockchain network is highly overloaded. But they also want to reduce environmental impact whenever they are making transactions, and also reduce gas fees for players, because every transaction requires a certain fee on the main blockchain network, but obviously whenever you're playing a game, you don't want to pay a fee for each and every action or transaction that you want to do within that game. So that's why private chains, layer 2 networks have been created. But then whenever you want to prove that you hold a certain asset on the blockchain network, or you want to trade it, in that case, players want to be able to move that asset from that private chain, from that layer 2 network, towards the main Ethereum network, for instance. And this is where bridges come into play. So a bridge is being created between one network and the other on the blockchain. And this is a very critical component because you're transferring assets from one wallet to the other, from one network to the other. And it's very complex to validate that process, because one network has no intelligence or information about the other, because both are operating fully independently. And this results often in mistakes and vulnerabilities where assets get stolen in the process of being moved from one network to the other, within the bridge, basically. Whenever you have a blockchain-based game and it's an NFT-based games, and you have a lot of NFTs in there, then generally you want to offer your players a certain marketplace where they can buy and sell those NFTs. And this can be a marketplace that you create within your game, inside the game client, or it can be a website, a web shop, where players are able to trade their assets. It needs not much explaining that during this process of buying and selling NFTs and proving that you own a certain NFT, that you're able to sell it off to another player, that there can be vulnerabilities in there as well, that you're writing a lot of custom logic there for that process to happen. So it's very important as well that the marketplace that you're using or creating, that this gets validated as well, to make sure that there is no option there for malicious actors, hackers, to steal assets. Most games have backend services. That's not different than any traditional game. So those are web APIs or web sockets that are being used to do registration, authentication, matchmaking, all those kind of actions. But within a blockchain-based game, you have APIs that interact with the chain. For instance, you want to fetch certain information about the NFTs that are owned by this particular player, or you want to grant the player tokens whenever he wins a certain match or a battle in a play-to-earn game. and those APIs directly interact with the chain. It's very important that those actions are being properly validated to make sure that players cannot actually claim within the game that they own a different NFT, or really making sure that they cannot get an infinite stream of tokens by claiming that they won every match, for instance. And this brings us to the last component within games. Because they are games, they have gameplay. And that actual gameplay, it doesn't flow over APIs, it generally flows over UDP or TCP streams, and it talks to a game server. If we're talking, for instance, of a play-to-earn game where the player receives a certain reward after the battle or match, then it's very important that the game server validates each and every action of that player within that battle or within that match. Because if he doesn't, then a player can claim that he won the match and in that way also gain direct monetary advantage out of it. So let's take a look at some of the common vulnerabilities that we discover in each of these components. And this might get a bit more technical, so please bear with me. First of all, we have the smart contracts. And there are a lot of highly technical smart contract vulnerabilities like reentrancy or reaching a block gas limit. It would take a lot of time to explain this, and I don't want to get that technical. But if you're interested in that, we have a blog post specifically about common smart contract vulnerabilities that you can definitely check out with images that assist. One of the things that I wanted to highlight today is front running, which is also a vulnerability that is very particular to smart contracts, and you won't find it in any web application, for instance. So when we're talking about the blockchain and when you're performing transactions onto the chain, then these transactions end up in a certain queue before they are being processed by all the different miners on the network. And this is not really a first come, first serve approach. Every user is paying a higher fee with his transaction, a higher gas fee, then this transaction will be taken first because the miners want to get the highest gas fees. They want to earn the most money. Now take an example where you have a certain smart contract and you wrote some logic in there that a player of your game, if he knows a certain password, then he is able to obtain an NFT, for instance. So he needs to supply the password that you gave him in order to unlock this NFT and get it inside his wallet. Now, the moment that this player enters this password, a transaction will happen on the chain that holds this password, and all of these transactions that are in the queue, they are visible towards other players. So a malicious actor could read out this transaction that is waiting in the queue. He could read out this password that is true, and then he could supply the exact same transaction calling the same method within the smart contract with that password, but use a much higher fee. And if he uses that higher fee, then his transaction would be taken first, which means that he would get the NFT from the smart contract. And the moment that the legitimate player that wanted to get the NFT is being, well, his transaction is being processed, at that point in time, the NFT is already in the hands of the attacker. As mentioned on the previous slide, well, bridges are very important components within blockchain networks, and it's very important that transactions that happen on the bridge are being properly validated on both sides of the bridge, so on both networks. Transferring an asset from a bridge is generally a multi-stage process where, first of all, you deposit or you send the asset towards the bridge, and then from the bridge, it goes towards the other network. And one of the vulnerabilities that we discovered, for instance, in there on a particular bridge was that a user was being able to deposit his assets from Ethereum mainnet towards a private chain. And just like I described now, so there is first a deposit that happens from the mainnet Ethereum towards the bridge, and then later on, the user is able to claim his assets into his private wallet on the private chain from the bridge. Now, if we performed that second stage first as a malicious actor, and we would register that we wanted to claim our asset from the bridge, an asset that was not yet on the bridge, then we could reserve this asset for our wallet. So actually, we told the bridge, please reserve this asset for my wallet whenever it comes in the bridge. This is mine and I want to claim it. So the moment that then the real holder of this particular NFT moved his assets towards the bridge, this automatically ended up in the wallet of the attacker, and in this way, he stole an NFT from another user. When we're talking about marketplaces, the common attack factors that we encounter there are quite obvious. Players being able to sell assets that they don't really hold or own on the blockchain and getting money for it, but as well buying assets for free or bypassing certain fees that are enforced by the marketplace itself. Here it's really important that for each of those actions that you can perform within your marketplace, that you have a smart contract in place that runs on the blockchain and does all the appropriate validation on the blockchain of those transactions. So don't just work with backend APIs there because they don't hold all that information and they're not able to make proper verifications of that and really make sure that you have a proper smart contract in place that allows these transactions. And then obviously within that smart contract, there can be vulnerabilities as well that need to be validated. Lastly, there are a wide range of gameplay vulnerabilities out there. It really depends on the type of game that you have, the logic that you have in there. But yeah, let me give one example here. Say that, for instance, you have a racing game that is play to earn, and whenever you would win the race, at the end of the race, you would receive a certain reward in tokens. Say that you could speed hack, for instance, within this game, and you were able to move your card within the game a lot faster than the other players, then you would always win. Obviously, you will get a lot of frustrated players that are playing within your matches, but as well, you would get a constant stream of income because you would always win and always receive tokens within your wallet that you can then sell off. So now that we looked a bit at, well, first of all, the components that need security, then at the vulnerabilities and how they can impact your game, let's take a look at what we can do to actually prevent those kind of things and prevent your blockchain-based game from being hacked and getting negative publicity, but also monetary losses. So first of all, and this is really important, you need to make sure that you have a server authoritative game. This means that you need to choose the right multiplayer technology that really allows you to send all actions from the player, from the client towards the server, and that then on the server side, there is proper logic that validates each and every step and action that the player is doing. On the client side, players can really modify and tempo whatever they want. So it is a server that needs to be authoritative and stating if a certain action is possible, yes or no. And then only if the server really approves and validates that the player has won, etc., then it should grant the right amount of tokens or NFTs, etc. Next to this, security awareness is very important. First and foremost for your development team. They need to understand that small mistakes within their code, even things like forgetting an equal sign, can have a devastating impact both on the business, the revenue, the reputation of the game, etc. So it's very important to create that security awareness amongst your developer team and have proper code reviews, etc. in place. But also the whole team needs to have security awareness. Lately, we are seeing a lot of hacks happening through social engineering, where certain secret keys are being stolen of certain wallets, and then assets are being transferred out of those wallets. So it's very important that the whole organization is aware of the security risks and understands that well, they need to take this very serious. You need to have the appropriate processes and policies in place to really prevent those secrets to even be known by a human being and being locked and stored in a vault, for instance. Since we are dealing with money here well, highly complex systems, it's very important for every component that interacts with the blockchain to have a source code audit. A lot of security audits don't look at the source code, but definitely when we're talking about smart contracts or APIs that directly integrate with the chain, it's very important that security engineers can really look at the code because, as I mentioned before, a small, tiny mistake that is missed by a developer can lead to a very big impact for your game. And even a security engineer can miss it if they don't have visibility and access on the code. So it's really important for those kind of audits that you always share source code with the security engineers. They are the experts, so they will definitely treat your code with care. They won't dump it on the streets, and it will really upgrade your game and make sure that most of the vulnerabilities in there are being found. Last but not least, also very important in gaming, there is a lot of updates. You provide new content, you provide new features to keep your community engaged. And there it's really important that with every new release that you're doing of your game, that you also do new security testing. And this is often forgotten because with every new change that you make within the code, within your game, a new security vulnerability can be introduced in those new components, new pieces. Sometimes it's not even clear which components have been changed. So it's really important that this testing occurs with every new release and that you have a clear and proper release cycle during your live operations of your game. And that was the end of this webinar already. So I'm wondering if we have any questions from the audience that I could answer, and I will try to do my best, obviously, to answer them to the best of my abilities. First question from the audience I see here. Do you think in the near future Web3 will replace Web2? I definitely believe that Web3 will replace Web2. I have no doubts that blockchain is here to stay and that it's a concept that will remain. The near future, how fast that will happen, that's very hard to say at this stage. I still feel that we are exploring, that there are constant. I mean, blockchain networks are being created like mushrooms nowadays. And while there are still the very known Bitcoin and Ethereum network, we're seeing a lot of new networks with new features, new possibilities. We are seeing a lot of new techniques, even in gaming specifically. There are constant new ideas how to integrate blockchain. So I feel that we're not fully there yet, also in terms of match with the community, match with the business side. So I don't know if it's the near future. We're definitely still on the hype cycle. But I do believe that it's here to stay and that it will eventually take over Web2 for sure. What are the most common hacking tools hackers use to attack the blockchain? Oh, very interesting question. If we're talking about hacking the blockchain directly, then obviously they have the same setup as users interacting with the blockchain. They do have a wallet, depending on the network, obviously, but something like MetaMask, and then they have assets in there. But they often go into the explorer of the network, and then they look at smart contracts that they are interacting with, and they try to reverse engineer those smart contracts. A lot of times, smart contracts are also shared, open source. So then hackers will definitely look at those smart contracts, and then they have an IDE, whatever is their preferred IDE, to write smart contract code just like you are doing, but instead of writing code, they're really writing tests for instance, they're writing those test cases where they test each and every individual method, and they look for a vulnerability, first of all, locally. They host a smart contract locally with a local network. They test all the different user inputs that you have in there, and then whenever they find something that is vulnerable, that works on their local environment, they will obviously exploit it on the real network. How difficult is it to create and publish a blockchain game in the market? Okay, very good question. I think it's definitely not easy to publish a blockchain game in the markets because you need a lot of marketing to get your community, or you need a big brand behind you. Obviously, if you're a big brand, then this might become easy. But most of the established brands also have issues with getting their community to try out those new blockchain Web3 components. So if you're like an indie developer, then I would definitely advise you to invest a lot in marketing to make sure that you build a community around it. There are a lot of Discord communities out there that try to create blockchain-based games, and then whenever you have that community that is really interested in this gaming ID, then you can start off with doing a sale of NFTs to gather the right funds to build your game. Okay, next question is a bit a technical one. I was wondering if you have any knowledge on the threats from quantum computing and quantum attacks on blockchain. Will blockchain need to change completely to protect from this? Yes. Well, the current cryptographic algorithms that are within blockchain networks definitely won't protect us from those quantum computers that are currently not here yet. But this is true for any cryptographic system out there. So there is a lot more than just the blockchain that will need to update to prevent these type of cryptographic attacks that probably will be possible by quantum computers. So the moment that we start having quantum computers, those quantum computers will need to develop new cryptographic algorithms, and this will be a change throughout any IT digital asset that is out there. So it will be a big change for sure, but not just for blockchain. Blockchain networks, they can change as long as all parties agree. What you're seeing in Ethereum, they are making changes towards the network. It's a more slow process because every node in the network needs to agree, every miner, multiple parties need to agree upon that change, but it's definitely possible to change the core of the network. What should we consider when choosing the proper multiplayer technologies? There are network libraries for Unity, such as, for instance, Photon Pun and Bolt. What are the main differences? Oh, yes, very good question. So both Photon Pun and Bolt are the older technologies out there for Unity. There are other Unity technologies, networking technologies out there, but if we are talking about Photon libraries specifically, then I would definitely advise against Pun. First of all, because it's deprecated, but secondly, it doesn't have proper server-side validation in place when we're talking about physics. So they don't support deterministic physics, which makes it very hard to actually validate on the server side if the player did a legitimate action. So I would definitely advise against Pun here. Starting from Bolt and the newer quantum and fusion libraries, they do have deterministic physics. They do have validation on the server side, and it really depends on the type of game that you are building, whether it's an MMO or it's a first-person shooter or it's just a casual racing game, which library is the best out there. And then I suggest you talk with the guys over at Photon because they can best advise you. But on a security level, all those three options offer a server authoritative system. When it comes to writing smart contracts, are there any existing libraries or frameworks that can be used to optimize and force security by design? Yes, there are definitely libraries out there. There are a lot of sources online that we can share later, I believe, because I don't know all these websites by heart that we are using, but there are a lot of knowledge bases out there on the internet of how you write secure smart contracts, what are the typical vulnerabilities out there. well, a few years ago, this was quite a new field, but it really catched up quickly. If we're talking about libraries, there are a lot of safe libraries out there, like for instance, SafeMat, Safe ERC20 for creating specific tokens, and all those safe libraries. They have default methods in there that are being tested, validated by the community, by security engineers. So I would definitely advise you to use those as much as possible to have security by design. But obviously, anything custom that you're still writing needs to be validated. How frequently should we perform audits? That really depends on how much your game is affected to change. So, as I mentioned before, you probably have a certain release cycle, and whenever you do a new release, a new milestone of your game, and you're releasing it towards the players, then definitely right before that release, whenever you go into a code freeze, you have your regular functional testing by QAs. Then you should also have security testing of the things that change, because you cannot really have mistakes in there. If your platform is hacked, then it will have a big impact on both your game as your community. I think those were all the questions. Thank you very much. Very interesting questions. I hope I was able to supply the right answers to them. If you have any more questions, don't hesitate to get in touch. Thank you very much for attending this webinar. I hope you got some new insights and some new ideas. You can always reach us via email, phone. Definitely have a look on our website. There are lots of materials out there. We have weekly blog posts where we discuss some of the topics that we have been discussing today more in depth. For instance, what is a bridge, and what are the risks of developing a bridge? What are common smart contract vulnerabilities? And then we have also more visuals and more text to guide you. You can also download anonymous security reports on our website to understand what a typical engagement with Cyrex, what would be the result of it, what are vulnerabilities that would be discovered by Cyrex. Thank you very much for attending, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on our next webinar.